Hello friends and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in August. I'm surprised that I said that month correctly because I feel like it's just been so quickly into fall already and I'm so excited. It has been so aggressively overcast and just like cool outside and I'm so excited for fall. I can't even begin to describe how excited I am for fall. But what I can begin to describe to you is the fact that I had some really great books that I read in August and I kind of wanted to just like compile all of them into one little video. I had all the books written down that I have read on a receipt because that's the kind of professionalism we're rolling with right now. I read a literal 6 books in August, which for me is basically not a whole lot at all, but I did end up traveling a very large but like also very last minute amount in August. I ended up doing 2 road trips and then I also did a week-long work trip, and so I was kind of all over the place in August, so escapism was definitely full send in effect. I definitely ended up going the quality over quantity route kind of accidentally this month, and I have 0 complaints about it. So without further ado, let's talk about all of the spectacular books that I read in August. And when I say spectacular, I mean 4 5 stars. Which, if you have been following along, I posted a couple months ago, I think it was May, and I had all of like, 1 or 2 5 stars this year. I'm making up for it. I'm very much so making up for it. So, let's talk about the books that I read in August. I've got the whole setup with like the tripod, the microphone situation right here in my car, and those guys that just walked past totally just made very awkward, very direct eye contact. And, it's okay. We're in my car at the moment because I desperately wanted to leave the house. And also I'm getting 0 daylight in my room at this time of day. And so it just kind of felt like a fun time to be alive, to, leave the house, get to explore the world, my little work from home exploration moment of the day, and talk about books. Like, what could go wrong? Things could go wrong, but that's okay. So August, I attempted to participate in Battle-a-thon, which meant that I had a really strong emphasis and focus on reading books that I thought I was going to give 5 stars. Now, I did obviously kind of succeed in that. I also kind of fell off the wagon with Battle-a-thon just because I was a little bit all over the place. So I'm so sorry to my team. I think I logged maybe 1 book. I did not do very well. Sometimes like that it be, but I did read some freaking amazing books, and I felt like for Battle-a-thon, the number one thing that I had to read was the 5 star that I had been predicting the absolute longest, and what do you know? We gave it a 5 star. Somehow there is still a bookmark in this book. I finished it. I absolutely loved it. I listened to the audiobook for the entire thing actually, and it was absolutely stunning, amazing, beautiful, everything that I ever wanted it to be. So this, if you don't know about Jade City, it's essentially... That's where that sticker went. Okay, make that 2 bookmarks. In this world, Jade and the people who can use Jade are extra powerful. The Jade itself gives you extra power, and as such, the power has kind of formed around these families, and all the families that have Jade have kind of continued to accumulate it. You've got a couple of these clans, so essentially you're set up into a world where you get this amazing, wonderful family drama, you get some gang drama, you get to see the relationship of all of these families and all of these people and how they connect within not only the family, but how then these families connect to other families who have these exact same relationships going on. It's so interesting. So in particular, you have 2 rival families, 2 rival clans, if you will, one of them being No Peak and one of them being the Mountain, and we get to follow primarily the No Peak clan. This book is literally peak sibling energy, and I freaking loved it. And I think part of what made me love it so much, I was talking with Tori, I think the thing is, growing up as the oldest in a sibling trio, I connected a lot to the sibling trio elements. I connected more so with a different character in the sibling trio than I thought I might, but I definitely connected with it, and I could kind of see being in a family how you kind of compare yourself to your siblings, you're compared against your siblings, you often are playing against your siblings, and you know how to hurt your siblings the best, and if anyone's going to be playing against your sibling, you know how to do it, but at the same time, no one, and I mean no one, is going to hurt your sibling and get away with it. Like, you're getting to see how they all have these different goals individually, and as individual people, each of these 3 siblings really do feel like individual people. The character development is very fine-tuned, but at the end of the day, they all share a common goal, and you're getting to kind of see them go after that common goal. There is quite a significant plot background, but at the same time, if all you want to do is sit back and focus on the siblings and just focus on the character development and the people and just like all of the emotions that these people are feeling, you can, and it's fantastic for that. And I think I did enjoy the plot, but mostly the character development of the story really did it for me. The ending happened. There was a little moment in kind of like the middle-ish that I felt like I knew was going to happen, but I really didn't think she would go there. Funnily went there. She went there, my friends. And anyways, I ended up loving this book absolute crap ton. I am going to hold off going into Jade War just a little bit because I definitely want to be in the mood for something like this again, because this definitely does take a little bit out of you. But overall, I loved it. If you haven't read it, I would fully recommend reading it, especially if you're someone who likes more of like an epic plot line. There is a smidgeroonie of romance in here, just enough to kind of like tide me over, but not too much. And I feel like this is definitely the book and the series, I assume the series goes this way, this is definitely something that I would recommend to just about anyone because it's so universally appealing in a lot of cases, but it definitely is like minorly big brain, so if you're not in the mood for it, it's not necessarily the best book to just read at any time. However, the time that I did read it, I loved it. So this one was an easy peasy 5 stars, and I was so glad to start off August in this manner. Number 2, a copy of a book that I literally just ordered today, House of Bane and Blood. Now, this is when I started to kick off my reading booktuber favorites video, and I can attribute every single 5 star that I read for the rest of the month to a specific booktuber, which I think is fantastic. So number 1, House of Bane and Blood. Cassidy, I Covers with Cassidy, recommended this to me, and I was absolutely gagged by this book. I was so sad. It was so interesting. It was so different from literally most other things that I'd read. The plot in this setting was just so different. It's not a typical fae fantasy romance, but it definitely gives you all of the good things that you like from fae fantasy romance. All of the romance was just hitting. The plot line was fairly easy to follow, but at the same time it was different enough to not just be like all of the other fae fantasies. Like, don't get me wrong, I love a good fae fantasy romance, but something just a little bit different was just something that I needed at the moment. So first of all, I think this was definitely a right place, right time book, but also just a book that I genuinely loved. So in this book, kind of following Jade City, it was actually, there are some similarities in the plot setup. So specifically, you have family drama, which apparently I've never really liked before, but apparently right now it's just doing it for me. You're kind of dropped into this scenario in which our girl is basically being bound into an arranged marriage in order to continue on her family's dynasty. Essentially, they've run into some money troubles. Their dad's dead, so her brothers are kind of like forcing her into this arranged marriage. So then she decides to go celebrate her last night of freedom, go get a drink at the town, lament the fact that she's basically selling her life away. One might want to have a pity party before going into that, but she ends up having a little meet cute with somebody, and everything kind of starts from there. So in this book, you end up having an arranged marriage slash a marriage of convenience. It's kind of arranged, kind of a convenience, so it's a little combination of all of the things. And as someone who's never really read any fan row specifically with that trope, it was so freaking good, and I need more of it immediately. Immediately, I freaking loved it. And it was not necessarily, you get some good forced proximity out of it, but at the same time, their families knew that it wasn't a marriage of love, and so they didn't have to go along with the marriage in front of their families. Like, their families definitely like knew that they were fighting the whole time, and I thought that dynamic was so interesting. And the fact that she was still learning about this new family and kind of being accepted into this new group of people, at the same time you're getting to find out more about her family and their business, and also just the magic system in this world was so interesting. And I really loved, obviously, the romance in this book. The plot in this book was so interesting, but it's definitely the kind of thing where the plot kind of takes a back seat to the character development and like all of the world building a little bit in this book, and then right at the very end you kind of are set up into another thing, which is kind of on par for duologies. I feel like I am so excited and desperate to read book 2. That is definitely number 1 on my fall TBR, which we will talk about at a later date, meaning I'm going to film that video immediately right after this, I'm thinking, because I'm in kind of a chatty mood, but we'll circle back to that. Point being, if you haven't already read House of Bane and Blood, it's fantastic. It was described to me as more of like a steampunk situation, and like it kind of is. He has a metal hand, and that's kind of like the extent of it, other than the fact that like her family owns a steam train company. It definitely was kind of giving Peaky Blinders, and I feel like that's the perfect time, like fall, and just like the overcast, dingy, like industrial city going on, and it's so interesting. It really was interesting. I liked it a lot, and I give it 5 stars. So I consider that a win-win for me. I would definitely recommend this book if you haven't read it already, especially if you're looking for something that's just a little bit different, but you still want to scratch that fan row itch. This is the book. So then, a book that's in the bottom of this pile, I'll put you here, put you here. Oh no, it's literally at the actual bottom. Stunning. And then we get into the book that Tori recommended, Tori Between Pages. I have been looking at this series and eyeballing this series for what feels like a literal eon. In particular, I bought this book in March and I still hadn't read it yet until August. It took me that long from having this as such an aggressively highly anticipated book to then finally reading it off my physical TBR, and I'm so excited I finally did. So I had read Slaying the Shadow Prince back in March, which is why I ended up buying the physical copy of that, and then Blood and Steel book 1. And I kind of felt like I wanted to just give it a little bit of time in between meeting Wilder as like a younger trainee. He wasn't really a trainee, he was definitely a war sword at that point, and he had kind of like passed all of his tests to be like a big bad, but he was definitely a younger big bad, and I wanted to see him as more of the jaded big bad, which you definitely got to do that. I was glad that I waited, but also the way that this book starts off very much so sets him up to be the big bad, intimidating male main character. So I wouldn't necessarily, if you have read Slaying the Shadow Prince and you kind of want to put this off because of that, don't. However, I was kind of glad that I did. I also was glad that I ended up reading Shadow Prince before book 1, Blood and Steel. Like, I'm glad that I read it as a prequel, because whenever I actually got to read Blood and Steel, this very much so felt like I was just returning to this world. And again, it was exactly what I needed in the moment. I needed to just like some low brain, especially after reading Jade City. I needed just some low brain fun time, and this book was that. If you like A Court of Silver Flames, there are very much so similar elements. There's a ton of training scenes. There's a ton of found family as you're getting there. They have to pass a trial kind of thing. That's about the only similarity. I love Court of Silver Flames, but I also really love this book, and I wasn't necessarily comparing Silver Flames to this at any point, but when people like compare this to Silver Flames, it's just like, if you're someone who likes training, you may or may not know, but if you're someone who dislikes training, you know. And I feel like if you're not in either of those camps, you might still end up liking it, and I would definitely give this a go. But like, if you're someone who doesn't, if you don't like a traveling scene, I love a good traveling scene. Ugh, all of like the forced proximity and the time that like you get to develop all the character work through traveling scenes, I love those. So basically this book was essentially written for me. All of these specific structural elements that I like, including training, traveling, a trial. So I'm definitely aggressively excited to continue on into Vow and Ruins in the full time. I'm so excited. In fact, whenever I put this book down, I immediately, and I do this every now and then, where I just knee-jerk need to pick up the next book, and I held myself off on this one because I did that with The Throne of Broken Gods. I did that with so the book 2 after Book of Azrael. I immediately picked it up, and then I kind of was like, okay, wait, I just need a break. I need to process everything that just happened to me. So I got like 10% of the way through of that book, and I kind of soft DNF'd it, and I know that when I go back to it, I'm gonna love it, but I also just knee-jerk jumped into it when I should have just like taken a breath and just processed the goodness of book 1, which is kind of the same thing that happened here, but I'm so ready. In fact, I'm gonna go order House of Bane and Blood, and I'm also going to order Vow and Ruins tonight. I say that I'm gonna end up never ordering it, and then I'm just gonna be sad that I don't own it, and then I'm never gonna end up reading it because I don't own it, but I'm gonna do it. Anyways, Blood and Steel, if you've heard a million things about this series and you haven't given it yet, you should definitely give in. Otherwise, you're laughing at me because it's taken me this long to get to it, and I did in fact freaking love it. And I gave it 5 stars if that wasn't apparent. So thanks, Tori. Also thanks, Cassidy, for recommending House of Bane and Blood, and then following it up with this. Stunning. And then to top everything off, Rachel recommended me Quicksilver. Also, if you've not already watched the vlog, generally speaking, the reading level is very accessible. I don't have to think about it. It is true escapism. I can just kind of like pick it up and read it and like binge it and have a good time, right? I'm here just for a silly, goofy time. However, one of the complaints that I do have is, I'm basically summarizing that vlog, but I'll go ahead and link it down below and in the cards. But essentially, Quicksilver feels like a very epic story, while at the same time being so easy and bingeable to read. Something that I really like about Van Row is that if the plot in the background is just very simple, it's fun, but I'm not necessarily going to think about it so long, and I think that's why I've had a hard time with 5 stars this year, is because I've not really had anything that has such an interesting world that I've really just clung to, and I just want to keep mentally in my head returning back to it. Quicksilver, though, this is, I've seen on a lot of people's best of the year list, and it definitely very much so deserves the spot. I would probably put it on one of mine. I think up until this point, like Book of Azrael, Quicksilver, but then Daughter of No Worlds are like my top, but then also like The Right Move by Liz Tomford, which we'll get into Liz Tomford here in a second. I'm thinking that those are my top 3 at the moment. Top four. I can't count anymore. Point being, I've read some really good stuff this year. I've officially read 70 books this year. I have had like 5 out of those that I'm just like obsessed with. Up until this month, apparently, because we're adding House of Bane and Blood, Blood and Steel, and Quicksilver to that list. So circling back to Quicksilver in and of itself, what's so interesting about this book, and I'm sure you've heard the summary of this book a million times over, is not only the character development, the plot is so interesting, the reading style is so good, but then the magic system is so interesting. I've read a couple of things here and there about like sentient like weapons, like a sentient sword, like what's it called? Warbreaker. Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson has a sentient sword, and this is like kind of giving some of those elements from that book that I really liked, but it's in like metal in general that can then be crafted into something else. Something else that's really interesting, she technically has some history in being a blacksmith, and she's now continuing to do that, and I think that's just an interesting profession, and like technique, artisan, skill, role in the world, I don't know what you would call it exactly, to follow. I think that's just an interesting topic. Then you also have the actual political system of this world. Because all of these fae are technically immortal, you're really getting to see a very long background, a long history that all of these characters have with both each other, but then within the different battles that they're currently waging, whether that is internal or external. And I just think that overall there's so many interesting pieces to this book. The writing style is super aggressively bingeable. I literally finished it in how fast I don't know, I finished it super stupid fast. And it was also during a time in which I was about to travel for work, and all I wanted to do was just sit down and read this versus procrastinate it. And it was great because I read it super quick, but it was pure escapism exactly when I needed it. And if you're looking for something to just like completely occupy your mind for a little bit, it's perfect because it's not so complex that it's hard to read and your brain's kind of like jumping around all over the place, but at the same time there's enough there to actually focus on. And I loved it. So if you've not read Quicksilver, you freaking need to read it. I gave it 5 stars. It's so interesting. Also, to not even mention the main characters, Sarah's, our main female main character, has got some interesting motivations as far as her character and like what drives her as a character. But then at the same time, Kingfisher, you're set up in this world, and then he just like kind of swoops in, and at first you're kind of like, I don't know how I feel about you, and then you start to get to know him, and I freaking loved it. Overall, I am chomping at the freaking bit to get book 2, and I know at the very end of Quicksilver it says that the book 2 is coming out in October 2024. Nobody said anything about that yet, and so I don't think that's going to happen. Also, it is being traditionally published, and it kind of makes me a little upsetty spaghetti because I desperately wanted the discreet cover. I managed to not order it in time. So I did actually order that yesterday, but there is a 2 to 3 week shipping time on it because it's so popular. They're trying to print 1 million copies, I'm assuming. So I have ordered it. It's probably never going to get here, and I should have ordered it eons ago. But if you haven't read it already, it is on KU, and you should read it. They kind of wrapped up my fanro little moment that I was having. It was so freaking good, and I want nothing more than to return to that era because I feel like reading 4 5 stars in a row and then making 3 of them fanro, all I wanted to do was just keep on reading. But with all of the crazy traveling things that were happening at the moment, all I wanted to do was just to like girl rot and read some romance because I just could not mentally process anything else, like any world building, anything. It just wasn't happening, and I desperately at the very beginning of August, I told myself I was going to read this book because this is something that I've been anticipating. It's one of my favorite tropes. Caught Up by Liz Tomford. This is a single dad nanny romance, technically. Our main girly pop, Miller, she is technically a pastry chef, and her whole job is she basically goes to different kitchens and fixes their dessert menu in order to help them get a Michelin star. And she kind of just like travels around. She's living the van life. She just travels around, does her little thing. Well, her dad actually is the manager of this baseball team, and come to find out, there happens to be a single dad on the team who keeps firing nannies because they keep sucking, and all they want to do is just be there because they're around all the baseball boys because they're so hot. And so he ends up firing all the nannies. So Miller ends up quitting her job because she basically gets like low-key sexually assaulted and like talked down to by a man because she is a woman in the kitchen. And then she decides, well, I guess I'm just gonna go home. I've got a couple months before my next gig. I'm just gonna take a break. I'm so burnt out right now. I'm just gonna go visit my dad, I guess. And so her dad's like, well, if you're gonna be here, I really want you to travel with me. Why don't you just like babysit this kid, and then we can get the justification for you to travel with us, because no family can travel with us unless you're not technically family, you're the nanny. What a setup, right? Yeah, it was really good. I was extra drawn to reading the series while I was traveling and flying and doing all the plane things, because this is the Windy City series, in which all of these take place around professional athletes that do travel, and there's a lot of like traveling little moments, and I just thought that was so fun and thematic and just like the moment. And it was in fact the moment. I would say I did not give this a 5-star. I gave this like a 4.5 or so. I gave it a 4, but it wasn't a 5. I like this a lot, but I at the same time wasn't like so aggressively connected to either of these characters like I was with The Right Move. But at the same time, she really hits you right at the end with all of the emotional feels, and just like I loved it. I would definitely say if you're someone who's in the middle of like a mid or a quarter life crisis, I would either really recommend this or really not, because both of these characters are kind of doing that. It's going to send you one of two ways. You're going to either really connect with it, or you're going to be like, oh, I'm also panicking and I should be panicking right now. Or remember that one time when I thought I was panicking? I'm panicking again. I'm panicking right now. So that could happen. That kind of did happen just a little bit. Like I was definitely all over the place, like traveling for work and like doing the whole, like I had a whole bunch of time to overthink things. And I was like, wait, am I panicking right now? Maybe I should be panicking. And so I think for that reason, it wasn't a 5-star. And if I would have read this when I wasn't actively in the middle of pure chaos, I might have ended up liking it more. But I definitely like this overall. I can definitely see how this is some people's favorite book in the series. I'm still attached to The Right Move, but I also just freaking loved this book. All of the like emotions that Liz Tomford writes in her book, but then also all of the single dad and nanny goodness. I like this a lot. So I give this 4 stars. And then remember that one time when I was just talking about how I was specifically trying to not knee-jerk go into the next book in the series? Yeah, me either. I then picked up Play Along. Here's the thing. If I had to pick in between Play Along and Caught Up, first of all, what kind of rude question is this? Second of all, I honestly might pick Play Along. Which sounds like such a weird sentence for me to say as a self-proclaimed single dad nanny lover. I think it was this for me. I think there were a ton of marriage of convenience moments, but I don't think this one really wasn't about the marriage of convenience. It was like general like intimacy issues and like how to be okay with other people and like how to trust other people. I think a topic that we don't really talk about a lot is struggling with both physical and emotional intimacy and learning how to be close with other people, both in proximity and both like away from people. Like I think that I have always been somebody who's not been like a big touchy person, even though I've desperately wanted to be a touchy person. I've always just been too panicky and like too anxious about like, oh, if I hug them right now, are they gonna think that's weird? And I think if you relate to that, you relate to that. Otherwise, you're just like a huggy person, or you're just not a hugger. And I feel like there are definitely like camps here. I'm kind of in the middle where like I want to be a hugger, but like also I'm scared to be a hugger, but like I want to be a hugger. And so I think that I connected emotionally. The way that Isaiah just like kind of swooped in and was like, it's okay. I know that you're going to panic when I hug you, but can I? And then if you say yes, I'm still going to hug you, and I'm just going to work through your panic with you. It was just like so cute and wholesome. And just like, I don't know, I feel like the intimacy, not being in your own little bubble and like being so far outside of your comfort zone and like actively trying to work through that, not only by yourself but with somebody else, and having somebody else who's really going to be there to work with you through that. It's something that I've not really read very much of before, and I ate it up. I think that Isaiah coming into it, I wasn't really sure like how I would feel about him as a male character, but I freaking loved him. I'm freaking obsessed. I would read all of the books that were ever going to come out in the series with all these characters anyways. I'm so excited for Rio's story. I will also say, I think Liz Tomford really gets you in the feels, because she does things like talk about how he, like Isaiah, he doesn't want to be the only single friend in the group. Rio better not find somebody because he doesn't want to be the only person in the group. And like being a single person, it was also, I don't know, both hard to read about, but at the same time very like, I don't know, it like made me connect with it too. So I think there were just a lot of things in both of these books that I really connect with, but also at the same time there were a lot of things that I was like, oh, that hit close to home, a little too close to home for me, but it hit, but I also connected. Like, it was just such a weird bag of emotions reading, especially both of these back to back. These two brothers are just literally the most wholesome group. I think reading this back to back is the perfect way to go. Getting to watch both of the brothers have their happy ever afters was so freaking cute. So these two, my friends, are the final books that I read in August. So overall, it was an absolutely stunning, amazing reading month for me. I read some really fantastic things. I read some really fantastic things recommended by other people. I was glad to actually take a step back and actually read the things that people recommend as opposed to being like, oh, well, I want to get to that eventually. Ooh, that sounds really fun. I want to get to that eventually. I would love to, like, the actual sitting down and reading books that people actually recommend, that people actually like. That's something that I don't really do quick enough. Like, I never just kind of like move and think, oh, well, they're recommending that book. Maybe I should just read it now because they said it was really good, so I might as well just read it now. I don't do that very often. If there's anything that this last month has taught me, it is to actually read the books that people recommend. A concept, I don't know. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed just listening to me gab about all of the books that I read in August and all of the fantastic books that have just happened to me lately. If you've read any of these, I'm so glad to just fangirl about these books with you. But then also, if you've not read any of these books, you need to read them. I think if I had to pick a favorite, I don't know, I feel like Quicksilver in and of itself, I liked it more, but like Blood and Steel, I freaking loved, and I really can see myself really loving the rest of this series. So either between the two of those. But anyways, if you made it this far into the video and you have nothing else to say, go ahead and leave some sort of like a summary, leave like a summer pool emoji, because I feel like this is the last time where we could really successfully use that emoji and it still be seasonal, because August is like over. Also comment down below if you're somebody who is actually good with picking up suggestions from others and actually reading them when they suggest it, because I clearly am not. But then it was kind of nice because then I kind of had all these favorites stockpiled and it was stunning. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day or night wherever you are, and I will catch you in the next one.